Hello, my name is Ashley Hall, and I am the primary investigator on this research study, and presenting alongside me is my colleague Sarah Morgan Parsons. We are both wellness interns at the University of Central Arkansas, along with Kara Gray, and we are under Dr. Brian Bolter, who is an associate professor at UCA in the Psychology and Counseling Department. Today, we'll be presenting to you the effects of wellness interventions on student stress and optimism levels. A variety of strategies, such as health clinics, campus recreation programs, counseling centers, disability services, and mentorship programs, are used within the university setting in order to impact students' mental and physical well-being. Previous research on optimism has shown that optimism has the ability to predict lower levels of academic stress, which in return can lead to higher levels of subjective well-being. Students that practice optimism have indicated that they perceive themselves to have more social support, to possess academic efficacy, and to be highly resilient. Contrary to popular belief, research has also shown that students that withdraw from college are often performing well academically, suggesting that other factors outside of academic struggles are playing a role in the retention rate of college students. One possible factor is students' lack of appropriate coping skills when dealing with the stress introduced by the college environment. The purpose of this study was to assess the effectiveness of university wellness intervention strategies on the levels of stress and optimism of college students. Findings from the study have potential to increase institutional influences on individual health and wellness by improving wellness implementation strategies, student orientation programs, and freshman success initiatives.
Over 300 students completed 2 surveys, one on their first day of class and the other 4 months later on their final day of class, self-reporting their levels of stress and optimism toward the future. In the final survey, participants further reported their engagement with university-based wellness programs and opportunities. Demographic data was also collected to be analyzed. Data included gender, ethnicity, and current class standing. Using a longitudinal pre- and post-assessment correlational design, researchers explored the relationship between participants' use of wellness interventions and student support services and their reported optimism and levels of stress. There were 141 participants that did not complete the study, but it is unknown if this was due to participants withdrawing from the class and/or university or due to lack of attendance. The results reported in the following slides detail the use of campus wellness resources by both males and females and across the ethnic demographics of white, African American, and Hispanics, due to a small representation within other ethnicities.
Adequate test-retest reliability was obtained on both the stress and optimism measures based on comparisons between scores obtained at the beginning and the end of the semester. Stress and optimism were negatively correlated at the beginning of the semester and even more strongly so at the end of the semester, indicating that higher levels of optimism were associated with lower levels of stress. However, optimism scores at the beginning of the semester were not related to stress scores at the end, nor were stress scores at the start of the semester related to optimism scores at the end. A 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, gender by minority status, by use of student support services, by use of wellness interventions, by assessment time, with repeated measures on the last factor, was performed on self-reported levels of stress obtained at the beginning and end of the semester. Wellness intervention use did not make a significant contribution to stress scores obtained, either as a main effect or in interactions with the other predictors.
Participant gender and use of student services were both related to stress levels. Although female participants reported higher levels of stress than males, regardless of use of student services, males reporting higher stress levels were those who were more likely to use student services. The interaction between gender and the use of student services on stress levels was significant.
Changes in stress scores during the semester differed for white and minority participants, with white students reporting higher levels of stress than minority students at the beginning of the semester, but with very little difference at the end of the semester. The assessment time by minority status interaction was significant.
Unlike the stress measure, changes in self-reports of optimism during the semester were related to use of wellness intervention and to minority status. White students showed a decrease in optimism over the semester, regardless of use of wellness interventions. However, minority students who used wellness interventions did not show this decline in optimism. The interaction between assessment time, minority status, and use of wellness intervention was significant. For male participants, somewhat similar results were obtained for the relationship between changes in optimism during this semester related to use of student services and minority status. For females, higher optimism scores were related to the use of student services, regardless of minority status. White male students had higher optimism scores than minority males, regardless of the use of student services. Minority students who did not use student services showed lower optimism scores.
Overall, freshman engagement with campus resources was lower than expected. Out of 311 participants, the Financial Aid Office, Student Health Center, Campus Recreation, and the Tutoring Center were the most utilized resources by freshman students. The other 14 wellness resources we evaluated were ranked by usage as shown here. Our research team focused on further analyzing the Student Health Center, Counseling Center, Campus Recreation, and Minority Mentorship Program by the demographics of gender and ethnicity. It is important to note that throughout each of these wellness resources, freshman females are less likely to utilize these resources as compared to freshman males.
Use of the Student Health Center showed that 47.59% of the 311 participants used the Student Health Center at least once within their first semester. The graph on the right shows the use of the Student Health Center by gender, with 50.82% of females and 55.82% of male participants utilizing this campus resource. Overall, 58.06% of the participants that utilized the Student Health Center were African American. 46.69% of the participants were white, and 36.36% of the participants utilizing the Student Health Center were Hispanic, as shown by the graph on the left.
The figures below break down gender further into ethnic use of the Student Health Center. African American females represented 57.69% of participants, 46.69% of the female participants were white, and 37.50% of female participants utilizing the Student Health Center were Hispanic. The use of the Student Health Center by male ethnicity was 60% of participants were African American, 33.33% were white, and 33.33% were Hispanic. The Counseling Center was interesting to analyze due to low utilization by freshman students. Overall, only 8.6% of 311 participants used the Campus Counseling Center. When broken down by overall ethnicity, as shown by the figure on the left, 12.9% of African Americans, 9.09% of Hispanics, and 8.26% of white participants used the Counseling Center within their first semester. The figures on the right display gender ethnicity. 11.54% of African American females, 8.38% of white females, and 0% of Hispanic females use the Counseling Center on campus. In addition, 33.33% of Hispanic males, 20% of African American males, and 7.84% of white males use the Campus Counseling Center. Overall, campus recreation was used by 36.66% of 311 participants. When breaking down the use of campus recreation by overall ethnicity, 38.71% of participants were African American, 36.78% of participants were white, and 27.27% of participants were Hispanic. This is expressed by the figure on the left. The use of campus recreation by female ethnicity was 42.31% of female participants were Hispanic, 37.50% of female participants were African American, and 32.98% of female participants were white. For male ethnicity breakdown, 50.98% of participants were African American, 20% of the participants were white, and 0% of the participants were Hispanic. The figures on the right show these.
Out of 311 participants, 8.6% utilized the Minority Mentorship Program. Freshman Hispanic participants did not report using this campus resource. For African Americans that utilized the Minority Mentorship Program, 60% of the participants were male and 46.15% of the participants were female.
Further direction for this study will be to analyze the incoming freshmen of the 2020-2021 school year. A new research group, including myself, Ashley Hall, will be conducting a follow-up study in order to analyze the effects of the pandemic on student stress and optimism levels, as well as their use of wellness resources. In addition, this research will allow us to see how students view COVID-19 precautions throughout the campus environment through their use of wellness resources. We hope to have a large, diverse sample of participants for this study in order for the results to be applied to the general population. Lastly, through the results of our previous study, we will be able to analyze which wellness resources need additional outreach initiatives in order to reach the larger student population. Finally, I want to say thank you to each of you that tuned into our presentation on the effects of wellness interventions on student stress and optimism levels. Although this conference is a little bit different than we all expected it to be, I am very grateful for this opportunity and to present my research to each of you. If you have any questions, please send them to my email, which is ahall21@cub.uca.edu. Thank you.